Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, Welcome to the India Land Forum 2020. We are delighted to have all of you with us, those you see on screen, and a large number of our guests who are on this webinar that is hosted by the National Council of Applied Economic Research, NCAER, in New Delhi. It's a proud moment for many of us who have been working at NCER over the last 2.5 years, working on land policies, land records, and you will get to see a large amount of the work that NCER has been doing in this area, as well as meet the people behind the work. I want to, first of all, welcome Shilpa Kumar, partner at Omidyar Network India, which has been our steady partner and friend and supporter in this entire endeavor, starting with a pilot study on land records modernization and digitalization in several states of India, then moving on to what you will see today and the next 3 days, the work that NCR has done on the Land Records and Services Index. You will hear more about this index and the data that has been collected from all the states of India and Union Territories of India that allow us to take a very close look at the quality of land records, the accessibility and availability of land records, particularly in digital form. I will introduce Shilpa in a moment. But before I do that, I want to introduce our colleagues who are on the team. I'll introduce some of them, and the others will be introduced in the course of the next 3.5 days, 4 days, when they will be presenting the work that they are doing. We're also delighted that we have a number of invited papers. As you have seen, the program is very rich. We start at 5 o'clock and hope to end around 8 o'clock, maybe a little earlier, maybe a little later, depending on how things go. Timing is obviously going to be very important on a virtual medium like this one. But fortunately, NCR has had a fair amount of experience running such large conferences over a period of days, and I'm sure that things will fall into place as we go. As we all know, we have to have some forbearance for when things don't turn out quite the way or when there are technical glitches, but I expect that there will be very few with the team that we have. I particularly just want to pick on 3 people who are with us on screen. Shashank Abhide, our research director, also a person who's been actively involved in land and in urban work over a long period of time. He, of course, has now stepped into a new role as a member of the Monetary Policy Committee of the RBI recently. Professor D.B. Gupta, who has been heading this work right from the very beginning and giving it the kind of stewardship that only somebody in his position of academic rigor and academic intensity can give. And then our program manager, Anika Kapoor, who is really the mastermind behind this entire conference. And you will hear more about the conference as we go. You also have Somnath Sen and Deepak Sanan, both very integral to this entire effort. Deepak Sanan really is the person who started this work at NCER. Tremendous intellectual and practical knowledge about land records simply because of his long innings in the government of India, in the Indian Administrative Service in Himachal. And the work that he has done really is the core of the team's work on Land Records and Services Index. And Deepak will join us shortly. He's in transport or in motion, but he will be joining us shortly in this regards. I don't want to take up too much time, except to say that the pandemic, if anything, has heightened the need for us to learn much more about how land records work, how land policy will evolve, and how in India we are able to use this asset, which is a large part of the household assets of many families and households, in a way in which we can leverage that asset, realize the value of it, to be able to either raise credit, to be able to lease assets out, to be able to improve the quality of the asset. These are all very prominent objectives in thinking about land records and land services, and of course, land policy in India. And in the course of the next 4 days, we will see a range of dimensions around this whole issue of land records and services, and of course, of all the implications that that has on the welfare of households. In particular, there's going to be a very interesting session on gender and land, which I think is a central feature of our own interest in thinking about how land records actually either promote the ownership and the possession of land by women, or how they actually mitigate against such a desirable outcome. There's sessions on land as collateral for credit. There's focus on urban housing and land. And of course, we will end the 4th day with a very interesting discussion on technology and where that is taking us. And we are pleased that we will have a member of the team that is working on India's Swamitwa scheme, which is going to use drone technology to improve and provide a modicum of ownership certification to those who live in Abadi lands in India's rural areas. So this is a large landscape, as large as the country and as heterogeneous and spread out and diverse as our country is. And we expect to see a glimpse of this through the lens of land records, land services, and land policies in India. I just want to end by noting that the role of Indian states is, of course, paramount here, because in line with our constitution, land policy is very much a state or a shared subject. And we are very pleased that we will have a number of people from our state's counterparts who will be talking to this issue or sharing sessions or commenting on papers that are going to be presented. The last thing I want to say is that the byline of this conference, the India Land Forum 2020, is very much data-driven research and evidence for land policy in India. NCAER is a 65-year-old institution that took birth in the context of data, and data is core to our mission and our work. So it's very appropriate that the organizers have chosen this as the theme and the byline, which will be there, I suspect, for future India Land Forums as well. With that, let me turn to my co-host today, Shilpa Kumar, who is at Omidyar Network India. She is the partner who is substantively in charge of their property rights program, and somebody who has vast experience in this area. She was earlier the key member of the ICICI Bank group. Her career has always revolved around financial markets, and she built what is today ICICI's Treasury and Global Markets business. She was MD and CEO of ICI Securities, India's largest retail broker, and a leading investment bank, of course, in the country. And she has held a number of board positions. So we're very pleased and privileged to have Shilpa Kumar joining us to open this conference. Over to you, Shilpa.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Shah. It's my pleasure to be here. And I guess, I would use this time to talk a little bit about Omidyar Network India's work and interest in this space. Land is, I guess, the primary measure and store of wealth for most Indians. It's also a subject that's very emotive for most people. And therefore, we see it as an asset class which probably has a high impact, if not the highest impact, on a person's economic and social well-being. I think this got very strongly highlighted in the current COVID pandemic. And we were left with this, strong imagery of a large, steady stream of migrant workers heading home. And in times of maximum uncertainty, I think it's clear that the place where every individual heads is really the safety and security of their own home, their own property. Given the centrality of land and property, therefore, in every person's life, it's a bit surprising to see the statistics on it. And I know I'm actually preaching to the converted here, but just to set the context in terms of why we are interested in this space, I will still kind of mention some of these well-known numbers. It's true that 77% of average in assets of Indians are held in property. Yet, it's equally surprising that a quarter of Indians worry about losing their property. 60% of our Indian citizens depend on land for their livelihood. And yet again, 56% of rural households are landless. There's a significant need for rental housing in urban India. And yet again, there's a large stock of vacant, locked up housing. I guess one could, talk about historical aspects of land usage, which has resulted in this complex web of land laws. We might talk also about the fact that land is a state subject, land administration in India is complex. And I guess what that really means is that not only in terms of business, where clearly if you look at ease of doing business, our rank is 63, but ease of registering property, our rank is 156. That's just one part of it. I think the bigger part of it is that in this asset class, price discovery is often difficult, liquidity is challenged, there are high costs for purchase or sale of this asset class. And all this really gets further compounded by the fact that 2/3 of all civil court cases are property disputes. I guess at ONI, our North Star is really, we look to back bold entrepreneurs who are focused on making life meaningful for every Indian. Given how central land and property rights are, we have focused our work in this sector with the objective that if every Indian has secure property rights, he or she would be able to meaningfully leverage these rights, both for their economic as well as social well-being. An extension of this is the fact that an inefficient land and property market is especially taxing for the aspiring next 500,000,000 of our country's population. They lack the means to navigate the space, as well as the ability to unlock the economic value of their land, and even maybe access government housing subsidies and schemes such as Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, because that can be accessed only by families with clear titles, really locking out a large section of people unable to access welfare. Last point, I guess, is that at a macro level, even if one steps back and looks at the country's economic growth, an efficient land and property market is really an important driver for the country's growth. So I guess when we look at this sector and we look at, the very apparent structural issues here, which are historical complex legislation, poor data, land property rights of citizens and businesses, one thing that becomes apparent is that the key stakeholder here is really the government, both central and state governments. And they are indeed the main stakeholders for defining and securing property rights of citizens and businesses in India. So to our minds, change in this sector can really happen only with the government itself, implementing change, both in terms of policy, laws, regulating action, and executing some of these policies. And for that to happen, what is really required is, this body of robust data and really evidence-based data. This data really, in a sense, can help drive the narrative for change. And in a sense, as the expertise to look at this data grows, I guess it becomes something that is more supportive of this change effort. The last point I want to make is that, when you look at robust data, we need something that spans not just our federal structure, but also various arms of the government, because property and land rights is not the domain of any one department, but indeed, goes across agriculture, housing, municipal administration, revenue, and I guess the whole gamut of government departments. Uh, at the same time, one of our beliefs at ONI is that technological advancements can really help lead change and drive paradigm shifts in outcomes. Very similar to how Aadhaar changed the very nature of welfare delivery. And therefore, we are strong supporters also of technology led change. And we feel that, supporting what we call bold entrepreneurs, be they researchers, practitioners, can really, change the very nature of this sector. At this point, let me just focus a little bit on the bold research and knowledge entrepreneurs whom we partner with, and who we believe can actually help build holistic and compelling data-backed narrative over here. Uh, Initially, when we started work in this sector, we did that, through various smaller studies, and they were, in a sense, green shoots of, the knowledge effort. But in 2019, I think this effort really got consolidated, both in terms of, trying to build momentum of quality and quantity of data evidence, in a sense, to drive progress. Our way of thinking about this was really, of course, first of all, to support a network of multiple high quality institutions in their efforts to build data, create expertise, and shine a light on issues in the sector. We call this the Property Rights Research Collective. But second, and I'd like to also share this with the broader audience, we also did this by really trying to encourage, fresh capabilities and different streams of related knowledge to come together by running almost, you can think of it as a research incubator. We call this the Research Innovation Grant, and it's run by NCORE. I think the last 18 months, we've seen, really a lot of growth in terms of the body of knowledge in this space. And it's been exciting that, the conversations at PRRC have really helped, the conversation and dialogue to grow and benefit from the work that each individual organization was doing. At forums like this, I think the dialogue becomes even more exciting as we have practitioners, researchers, government, and we can all benefit from each other's insights. And our hope is that, as this momentum grows, hopefully it will lead to growth in even more entrepreneurs in this space and more funding to support this work. I guess, while this initial momentum is exciting and this conversation is a great one, I think I would like to conclude by, reiterating our commitment to this hypothesis that security of property rights can and will drive a positive and catalytic change in the economic and social well-being of citizens and businesses. And in supporting this work, we stay committed to supporting 4 types of bold entrepreneurs. First of all, and what's on evidence over here is really those entrepreneurs who build this body of robust knowledge that will demystify the issue, hopefully help in policy making. Also those involved in administration and policy making and who are keen to experiment and build capacity in this sector. Those entrepreneurs who are looking at innovative and tech-based solutions, because that's really the fastest way to build transparency, reduce costs, and increase confidence. And lastly, also entrepreneurs who through both for-profit and non-profit solutions are really looking to unlock economic value of property and enable access to credit. So that's how we think about it. And I would really like to thank Dr. Shah and the team at NCAER for putting this wonderful Land Forum 2020 together and for allowing me a bit of space to share our thoughts. Thank you so much and wish the conference all success.
Thank you, Shilpa. It's very kind of you. In a sense, just as we are all straining and struggling and striving to unlock the value that resides in India's land, may I say that your own support, your organization's support for this work is, in a sense, trying to step back one stage from that process and unlock the value in all our heads that can then be applied to this very vexatious problem of land and land acquisition and ownership and property and the realization of its value. And I want to commend ONI not just for doing it, but for doing it in the community spirit with which it has done it. And I'm particularly proud that NCR is a leading member of the Property Rights and Research Consortium. There are others that you will hear from, including in this very first session after our keynote speaker has delivered his keynote address. With that, we'll try and stay on time. So I don't want to take up any more time. Thank you, Shilpa, for those very inspiring remarks. And I also want to recognize Shreya Deb, the director at ONI, who really is the fulcrum that has moved this lever in a very big way. And Shreya, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So with that, let me turn over to Somnath Sen. Somnath Sen has been at the center of this work along with Deepak Sanan. He will introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Haque, today. Shom has tremendous experience working across South and Southeast Asia and Africa. He's a public economics expert, a management expert, and also has worked on consumer marketing and research. He actively works, of course, with us. He's also an active advisor to the World Bank in a lot of its work across the region, and we are very proud to have him as part of our team. Shom.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shah. May I take this opportunity to introduce our keynote speaker for today, Dr. Haque. For anyone working on agriculture, development, and policy, Dr. Haque is a very well-known figure. He's currently the distinguished professor at the Council for Social Development, and he has served with the Indian Agriculture Development Establishment in Government of India in various capacities. He has also served on various international organizations like the FAO, the Bank, and ILO. He has authored many books and currently serves as the chairperson of the special cell of the Niti Aayog on land policy. Professor Haque, may I request you to take over now and deliver your keynote address. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, Dr. Shekhar Shah ji, Dr. Shashank Bhide, Dr. Shilpa Kumar, Dr. Sen, and many distinguished persons that I expect to be here in this conference. In fact, I agreed to join, otherwise also because of my own interest, but then I did not know that I'll have to speak. Only 2 or 3 days back, when Dr. Shashank Bhide wrote to me, I could not say no to him for various reasons, personal as well as because of my interest in the subject. Now, when we are discussing the issue of land, particularly the data-driven research and evidence for land policy in India, I'll be focusing mainly on agriculture-related things, but also infrastructure, industry, and all that. And also I'll try to cover as much as possible the broad agenda that you have set through this agenda you have circulated today. Most of the points will be covered, but then maybe somewhere it will be more, somewhere it will be less. So I don't know. Let me see. Sir, first of all, I think I will like to say that when you talk of data-driven research and evidence-based policy, whether it is land policy or any other policy, there can be nothing better than this, because when your policy is research-based or evidence-based, then it is more acceptable. It is more well-known and more acceptable to the policymakers and also to the people at large. This is one. Secondly, many times we make policies without knowing the ground situation, differentiating policies. But if we have this thing in mind, and this is the basis for your policy making or policy recommendations, then I can only say that we're in the right path and will not make much mistake. It will be more acceptable to the policymakers and also to the people at large. Otherwise, you may run into some trouble at some places. Now, you also know that countries, I think, particularly in East Asia and even other Asian countries, I should say, how land policies have played an important role. Recently in China, Vietnam. In Vietnam, land policy changes are directly associated in 92, 93 period when they were just moving ahead. I was there for about 5 months as a member of the team of FAO. So, in fact, it is the land policy reforms which led to rapid agricultural development, and agriculture development led to rapid rural industrialization and rural development, and then it led to overall economic development in a big way, or faster way. We know this. In India also, all of us know this, but somehow we could not have I should say, we could not have right type of policy that should have thought of, at least keeping in view both the short-term and long-term perspective of the changes that should be occurring. Some of the land reform measures which we adopted in the 50s, immediately after independence, it worked. For instance, abolition of intermediaries or zamindari, brought, the farmers, the cultivators, the landowners into direct, particularly the cultivators, I should say, into direct contact with the government. And intermediaries are abolished, and that created a lot of incentives for the farmers to produce more efficiently. Agriculture development policy in the first 5-year plan, particularly, I should say, began with this kind of land reform measures, abolition of intermediaries, to some extent tenancy reforms and sealing. But then sealing laws came a little later in the 60s and 70s in 2 different rounds. And when in the first round we found that the sealing laws are not very effective for various regions, I think things were improved. And then in the second round in the 1972-73 period, I think a lot of improvement was there in the laws. But even then, we found the sealing laws did not make much headway. In fact, till now, in fact, at that time, it was estimated that about 20 million hectares of land will be redistributed among the landless poor, and that surplus land was available. But finally, we saw not more than 2 million hectares, I think, was made available through this sealing laws. And not only that, what had happened is that because of the sealing, many landowners lost interest in agriculture. And they said, if there has to be sealing, then what is the incentive for them? Because that is the only asset that want to acquire and cultivate more efficiently, having economies of scale and all that. So I think that is one thing about sealing. Third is about the tenancy reform. In fact, that is the most saddest part of our story, in the sense we thought land it will be transferred to the tiller. And in practice, so far what happened is only at that time, in fact, at the time of independence, nearly 35% of the total agricultural land was under tenancy, of which so far only 4% could be transferred to the tenants of the tillers. The rest of the land, in fact, from them, the tenants were evicted from land, partly because the tenancy laws were so restrictive that the landowners were afraid to lease out land. And they had some opportunities and ways, legal loopholes, to use it or to evict the tenants from land or which they were tilling. So it did not really help much tenancy reforms that way. Secondly is that we had consolidation of holdings in some places, Punjab and Haryana particularly in the first round, and later on even UP joined. So these are the three states which had consolidated their fragmented holdings, which paved the way for investment in irrigation and land improvement. And I think I can say for sure that in the 60s, when you had green revolution, mid 60s or late 60s, we started having green revolution. I think this helped quite a lot. This happened basically in Punjab, Haryana, and Western UP, mainly because of the consolidation of holdings, led irrigation investment, and after all, the technology played its own role, fertilizer and HYV technology. But most other states did not do much, or they could not do much in terms of consolidation of fragmented holdings. Presently, I think I don't want to detail out all those things, but first I'll say that still we have several land policy related constraints in India, both for agriculture, infrastructure, and overall economic development. And for that, I think I've listed some of the things I just read out. I think the first and most important constraint in this test a little bit afterwards, we have lack of accurate land record and conclusive land title. We have lack of consolidation of holdings, as I said. I think this also, comes in the way of investment in irrigation and land improvement. Lack of farmer-friendly and development-friendly land acquisition and land conversion policies. Denial of land rights to women. Lack of recognition, codification, and record of customary land laws in both 6th and 7th scheduled areas. Poor implementation of forest rights, particularly the community forest rights. Mismanagement of village of region-specific land use policy and planning. These are some of the areas which I thought I must share with you or at least mention to you. And these are the concerns when you talk of land policy in the context of India's development. Regarding restrictive land leasing laws, as I said, immediately after 5th, I think mostly it was in the 60s and 70s also, most of the states either banned leasing or imposed heavy restrictions on leasing out of agricultural land. Kerala and Jammu or Kashmir and even Manipur, they completely banned leasing out agricultural land without any exception. Your states like your Odisha, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, and several other HP, several states, they did not legally ban, but then there are so much restrictions that no landowners would like to lease out land because of the fear that if you have leased out land, government could take so much action to evict the landowner. In fact, to give ownership right to the tenants. So in 1957 itself, there was a special movement for changes were there in the law, but not really so much. Then, but this does not mean, as I said, that tenancy was abolished or could be eliminated. Market forces were informal tenancy continued, and even today it continues because there are economic reasons for it. There are people who have surplus family, and there are people, genuine reasons that they could not cultivate the resources, either labor resources, or capital resources, or even otherwise they had other opportunities to take up. So as a result, I think the tenancy market, the lease market continues, but it informally. What has happened is that the informal tenants have a real problem. They don't have any security of tenure. They don't have access to institutional credit or insurance, or for that matter, any support service. And as a result, they have neither incentive to cultivate land efficiently, nor ability to cultivate land efficiently. So this is how it affects agricultural productivity or growth. Secondly, many of the landowners and taking up some non-farm activities, but the law stood in the way of their exiting from agriculture and taking, or even there was opportunity for land leasing was legal, they could have leased out on some rent. They would not have kept their land fallow. Currently, you will be surprised to know that in India, nearly 25 million hectares of land is kept fallow. Certainly, if 25 million hectares, if the leased active land lease market was there, leased out without any fear and got at least some rent, and then they could have invested that money in some non-farm activities. So these are some of the things which I think created problems with respect to our tenancy reform or tenancy laws. And that is one reason why in Niti Aayog recently, we prepared a model land leasing act. In fact, our chairman of an expert group, and even in the land policy cell, I think I tried to do something about it. We prepared a model land leasing act for creating a legal framework in which landowners can lease out land without any fear of losing land right. And tenant farmers will have access to all the, first of all, the security of tenure for the lease, agreed lease period. And also they can access institutional credit, insurance, and other support services. So this would have helped really improving agricultural output growth. But somehow only some of the states have adopted it. Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh have already gone ahead with this adoption of this model law. Maharashtra also prepared a bill. There were some problems here in the center. Punjab government has prepared a bill, but not yet. It has not gone through the legislative process. I think all the time they said we'll do this in this session and next session, but it has not come so far. So hopefully, I think this legal framework will be accepted by all the states because it is up for a state subject. The states have to do it. So this is regarding your tenancy reform. Then another thing which comes in the way of not only agricultural development, but overall economic development, I should say, is lack of updation and digitization of land record, followed by conclusive land title. In fact, if you read from various legal articles, in fact, articles published in some law journals, you will find there are a large number of land ownership related cases pending in various courts, both in the local, subdivisional, and district courts, and also in the high courts. And consequently, there is insecurity of land tenure and reduced incentive to invest for productive investment, even by the actual landowner sometimes, because he does not know what happens as a result of these court cases or conflicts. It comes in the way of private investment in rural industries and infrastructure, as investors do not want to risk their investment in insecure land title. It has been estimated that nearly 1.3% growth of GDP every year we are losing due to not having this kind of up-to-date land record, which leads to land conflicts. Hundreds of infrastructure and other development projects have been either stalled or delayed due to land disputes. In fact, I can tell you during the last 5 years, Land Watch data, if you look at it, you will find nearly 563 or so, very important high-value projects, infrastructure projects, have been stalled because of land conflicts only. And this again mostly in some of the tribal areas where a lot of investment has gone, but then again there are problems in starting their projects. So I think this is one. Secondly, I think the experience of several other countries, that is Australia, England, or elsewhere, and even here some of us have tried to argue that if you have a conclusive land title, after this, not before this, this is the precondition, in fact, I should say, unless you update your land record on regular basis, you digitize it, and then we start the process of conclusive land title. your conclusive land title exercise will be a futile, not only a futile exercise, it can do more damage than good. So, but if you follow this particular process, sequencing and all that, it can help reduce land dispute and activize land sale and land lease market for unlocking investment opportunities for growth, as you have been, trying to achieve. It can prevent encroachments and land grabbing also, because if you don't have a proper land record, you find a lot of places land mafias will encroach and grab the land, and the weaker sections of the people will lose, and they cannot, they will simply surrender. It can also help improve access to credit by enabling titled property to be used as collateral to unlock value, and consequently private investment in land as well as land productivity enhancement take place. It will also reduce land transaction cost and also help the government to implement policies relating to land management, land acquisition, and overall land governance. If you are going for land acquisition also, if your land record system is not proper, you do not know which lands you are acquiring and how to compensate and whom to compensate for the land acquisition. So all these practical problems come if you do not have a proper system of updating and digitizing land record. But there are huge challenges in this context, I should say. Land records have to be regularly updated and digitized, no doubt, but the present system of digitization of land record is very faulty. I think you will know from the studies conducted by Sannan and NCR team. But other is also, I think if you try to closely look at some of the data that you have, you will find there are problems. NCR's own recent research study on land records services shows that there are huge gaps between what the government record says and the ground truth or the ground reality. Government has no time and interest in updating land record on regular or periodic basis. There is a total neglect of land management and land records, at least the way things are being done, either at the state level. Central government, of course, can only assist or facilitate this process. It has to be done by the state government. Very few revisional surveys have been concluded. Some of the surveys which started some 15, 20, 30 years back, till today, that has not been completed for various regions because the process is lengthy and costly. Leveraging modern cost-effective technologies and community participation probably would hold the key in this respect. But what is happening is, this is also missing in our exercise for survey and settlement, and particularly the people's participation is missing. Technology-wise, in some cases, they go for satellite imagery and total stations and all that. But then, at least in the context of, I should say, people's participation or the community participation to facilitate the process of speedy implementation of land record program, I think it is not happening. And our own, based on my own knowledge, I should say, or interaction with some people who are doing it in Landasa, in say, not Hyderabad, it was in, what is that district? Nalgonda and Karimnagar, where in about 3 months' time, in about 6 villages, the entire land record system was not only updated, corrected, and digitized. This was done by the local, community workers. Some legal aid, of course, was provided, but then the local tehsildars also helped, and this could be done in just about 3 months' time. So, in fact, if you have a team of workers like this, which also provide employment, government can certainly start doing something on a large scale all over the country. But somehow, I think you try to convince one bureaucrat at the center, it does not percolate to the state levels in most cases. And if it percolates, the next time there will be a new secretary in the government of India, and things will disappear. So you don't know really how long you will have energy to go on convincing each and every secretary that comes there after every 6 months or 1 year or at least 1.5 years, so not more than that. So I think these are the practical problems that we have. But anyway, I think what we find, we have a very good scheme of modernizing, land record, particularly now it is under Digital India scheme. I don't think it is so much problem of a fund, but the willpower of the commitment of the bureaucrats concerned, And if the government wants, I think this can be done. But somehow, I think till now, I will tell you, the pilot scheme for this started in 1989-90, when in fact, that time I was in NIRD. The first 2 years, the money routed through me only. I was Director, Center for Land Reform in NIRD to all the estates. Initially, some of the estates showed a lot of interest and enthusiasm about it. But then, till now, what has happened is that I should say the work is not complete. In the 11th five-year plan, we thought at least by 12th five-year plan, everything will be over and we'll be able to give conclusive land title to all our landowners. And where we are today, we are still, trying to find out where we are and what wrong I think we are facing and all that. But anyway, even according to government's own admission on record, 13 major estates in India have not yet digitized or digital connectivity between sub-registrars, offices and tehsils for enabling simultaneous registration and mutation of all transfers of land through registered deeds. This is the government data. I'm quoting, of course, little dated up to 2018 December. Several estates, including Karnataka, Jammu and Kashmir, Delhi, and most of the northeastern states, have not yet started digitization of cadastral maps. 12 states do not have even 100% computerization of registration. This includes some of the developed states like in Punjab and Haryana, Tamil Nadu, and things like that. 17 states have not yet completed computerization of land records, as I said. And then regarding integration of land records and property registration, only 11 states have completed, 10 states are halfway, and 10 states have not yet started it. So this is the state of affairs after so many years of this kind of modernization of land record program and Digital India program. And still, in fact, till recently I was in India dealing with the subject, we discussed the issue of conclusive land title also. And if this is the state of affairs, I'm sure in most places you will not be able to push some such thing. Maybe in a few pockets, some union territories or some places you will be able to do it where things are a little better. But in most of the rural areas, most of the small towns and places, I think we are far from this kind of reality. On consolidation of holdings, I have already mentioned to you that only Punjab, Haryana, and UP completed their first round of consolidation. But again, land you find a lot of fragmentation. In fact, the recent survey shows that about 2 to 5 plots on an average you have for the smaller marginal farmers. And if you go for the medium and large farmers, up to 17, 18 plots each farmer has in different places. So if you have this kind of fragmentations, there is no way any single farmer of that category, even large farmers, I should say, make investment in either tube wells or any other land improvement measures. If the entire land is on place, certainly you can make a smaller investment and then get the result. But if he has to install tube wells in 16 or 17 or 20 places, there is no way he can do it, and this is not the way to do it. So I think these are the practical problems, and we need to address this issue even now. There are various reasons why this could not be done. I think in many places, land record was not proper. In some places, there was so much of corruption among the officials that people got fed up, and politically, then there was a lot of criticism, and people said, no, I think we're not going to do it. In fact, many states have discontinued. Bihar has discontinued, Maharashtra has discontinued. So a lot of states have discontinued. They are not doing anything on this now. Then I think one of the subjects which you are discussing in this seminar is land rights of women. Ensuring land rights to women is very crucial for various reasons. At the global level, there is research which shows that if you can give equal land right to women, they will produce more or less equally, or more or less equally efficient in agriculture, or in some cases they can be even better. In fact, in the context of global research, the FAO says at least agriculture productivity can be increased by 4 to 6% if we can give equal land rights to women. Then also there will be significant reduction in poverty if we can do this. But there are issues in the context of India. We find hardly 10 to 12% women have land ownership right. Although if you go for the farmers data, you will find, in fact, 42 to 45% of women are in agriculture, and they are in agriculture. In some cases, in Uttarakhand, places like that, up to 68 or 70% farmers and women will be in agriculture. Women actually, Uttarakhand, it is the women-dominated farming there, because the male members mostly they have migrated. But then again, even in this case, women are not generally recognized as farmers. They don't get extension services. They don't get technology of their choice. They don't get any support services which the government otherwise will be providing, because the land is not in their name. If the husband, particularly if he has gone to Middle East or some other countries in remote places, there is no way things can be smoothed out and they can get some of these support services. So they are at a very disadvantageous position. The reasons are many. In fact, basically, the lack of political will, I should say. There is also huge socio-cultural barriers. I think women are not recognized not only as farmers, but even in their own homes. They feel they will have to go to their in-laws' house, and finally, it is the husband's. Sometimes it's also the husband's property. That is our social kind of system that we have inherited, and continue with this. So unless women are freed from this, or start asserting for their own rights, there is some kind of political and social mobilization for this. There is no way women can be given equal rights, land rights, at least in a country like India. Of course, there are some good examples, not in terms of land ownership, but women farmers in Kerala doing collective farming under Kudumbasri mission, which is a poverty eradication mission, joint liability groups. They are all poor, marginal farmers or landless women. They have joined together as a group under Kudumbasri mission. The government is giving them all kinds of support. In fact, in technology support, credit support, and NABARD gives them some kind of credit subsidy for them, and that is helping quite a lot. Similarly, in the case of West Bengal, nearly 2.6 lakh families, poor families, I should say, got homestead plot of 5 to 10 cents in size in different places, and they are generally registered in the name of women or jointly in the name of both husband and wife. So this is one thing where there is some kind of efforts to empower women, and women has got some right, and there it is not just a very trivial thing, I should say. It is very important, because some of these families I have seen personally. I think they are able to grow fruits, vegetables on their kitchen garden. They are able to keep some goats or cows, or do some supplementary activities and generate incomes for them. Also, it helps them to improve their food and nutritional security. So I think it helps a lot, and particularly if women are the owners of such land, I think things are even better. Then next is securing land and forest rights of tribals. In most of these scheduled areas, as I mentioned, there is a customary system or community ownership kind of thing in an informal manner, because it is not recorded, it is not codified, it is not recognized by our lawmakers, but the society, the community recognizes them and they do it. But if the land has to be transacted, suppose somebody wants to go there and take up such land for investment in industrial development or any other things, infrastructure development, then they will not be able to buy it, because the land record is not proper, and there is no, and even the normally what is happening is that we call them in different names. The village heads will be there. And these village heads will say village head will say that he is the owner of that land. Sometimes he will do all kinds of hanky-panky. He does not. In Manipur, I have seen, even though he does not stay in a village, in his own village, a stage in Imphal, he sells the entire, property of that village, though although this is commonly owned, or supposed to be commonly owned, but unrecorded under the present system. So I think there are huge issues there. Similarly, in the case of community forest rights, two things I'll say. Only some pockets of Vidarbha in Maharashtra, Kutch in Gujarat, and in some pockets of Kandhamal in Orissa, there is some progress. But otherwise, since 2006, I think we find the progress is very minimal, like any other land reform in this country. And but even those minimal results that we find in terms of community forest rights in Maharashtra particularly, and also in Kutch, that this has brought about some kind of economic and ecological revolution in the area in terms of improving soil health, preventing soil degradation, creating new forest areas, afforestation, and improving the productivity of bamboo, sal, and teak. And the incomes of these people, community, has increased enormously. There are some research studies recently. Again, I'm not saying just because of my seeing the areas, but TIS has conducted a study recently, and they have come out with some such results. We don't have to depend on forest bureaucracy to conserve forests or trees. It is the local communities who will conserve them better. This is not only said by Haque, but there is global evidence for this. In fact, Eleanor, very famous lady who won Nobel Prize, her main work is based on this management of commons, and then how things can be better with community participation and community management, not bureaucracy. But how to do away with bureaucracy, that is the challenge. Can we do it? When your top people are dependent mostly on useless bureaucrats who come in the way of development, but still they will decide development policies. Anyway, so this is the problem that we have. Then also we have tragedy of village commons, I casually mentioned. We have about 15 million hectares of, some of these known commons like pasture land, cultivable wasteland, etc. If you can really manage with the help of village communities, I think this can bring a lot of improvement in the income of the people there, poor people there. But you need to have well-defined ownership and management of these commons. This is lacking presently. Also, I think I should say that if you do it that way, it will help in ensuring integrated use of village commons through convergence and synergies of various ongoing development programs. For example, pasture land and cultivable wasteland can be developed using Manrega resources and leased out to poor women collectively for further cultivation and livestock rearing, as well as agroforestry, horticulture, etc., which can help increase their incomes and reduce distress. We have reached experience in implementing some good, albeit innovative land policies in a limited way in India. Their upscaling, of course, remains a challenge. What is needed is a holistic, albeit inclusive and participatory approach to land management, and the keys are secure land tenure or property rights, unambiguous and dynamic legal framework, supportive bureaucracy. This is very important in the context of India. If you have one single bad bureaucrat or civil servant, he can kill the whole initiative. Nothing will happen in the system. Even the topmost man in the country, he depends on a bureaucrat. And a bureaucrat has to be very good and well-meaning and progressive with dynamic kind of outlook and understanding. Then also you need appropriate land use policies and planning. You don't, presently, of course, we don't talk about planning. Planning is a bad word, but I feel unless your land use or any policies for that matter are followed by appropriate planning, I think things do not take off. There are problems. Then we have lack of friendly and development friendly land acquisition and land conversion policies. I mentioned these are a very lengthy process. There are issues of timely payment of compensation, R&R, especially in many scheduled areas, avoiding irrigated and fertile land, social impact assessment and public hearing, This is one of the reasons why some of the state governments have already amended their laws, but most cases this could not be done. Again, in the case of some official in the government of India, I think they simply did not entertain any such proposals from the state governments, and things could not move much. Of course, the court also sometimes comes in the way, saying that why you are doing this and all that. I think to conclude, I will say that absence of appropriate land policies and land management practices come in the way of investment in land improvement, infrastructure development, as well as technological innovations. Unless proper land policies are in place, the pace of technological innovations in agriculture will be slow and non-inclusive. The tenant farmers, women farmers, tribal farmers, and other marginal farmers may be more marginalized. Even the so-called artificial intelligence and blockchain technologies, which we are propagating, will do no good to farmers. While the present government at the center seems keen to push economic reforms for growth, sequencing of reforms and their contextualizations are very important. While sequencing reforms, land policy reforms, especially land leasing reform, updation and digitization of land record, then securing land rights of women and tribals, preventing the tragedy of village commons, and location-specific land use policies and planning should be the priorities. And finally, in the context of urbanization, the point is land is needed not only for agriculture, land also is needed for infrastructure, urbanization, industrialization, and so on, both physical and social infrastructure. If you have to do it, again, it has to be, the policy has to be proper, how you smoothly change or take the things ahead. Otherwise, again, there will be all kinds of disruptions. You have a lot of slums, mainly because you don't have a system of managing it. Even if you want, in some cases, slum improvement schemes are being currently, done, and also there is a scheme called affordable housing. But then again, in some cases, I think my own experience is that it is not taking off in many places for various reasons. It is again not affordable. First of all, because people don't have income of their own, even that kind of affordable housing, because which we say it is affordable. I'm able to speak on this basically because I also chair one committee of the Ministry of Environment for appraising infrastructure projects, and in the housing projects come for this kind of appraisal. And many of these projects, I think, I'm sure, will not be affordable. And secondly, the institutional credit system that we have is not very effective. So as a result, even this kind of scheme will not take off. UN, particularly now that they are in this picture of helping us in promoting good land policy initiatives. They have done some good work in Odisha particularly. In fact, I had not personally seen, but then I talked to some people there, and they are very highly appreciative of this kind of initiative. So some of these schemes should be properly studied, and again, upscaled, or maybe widely spread in some other places. So how we do it, these are all new things that we can do, but these are important. All these have huge potentials to unlock forces of investment and growth and rapid rural transformation as well as economic development. I think I will stop here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Haque, for this really wide-ranging keynote address that lays out the agenda for us in this very important area, and your scholarship and passion for bringing about change is going to be an inspiration throughout these 4 days. So thank you, Dr. Haque.